Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Going to talk about defensive rifles today. Most of you, many of you, I'm sure, have AR-15 or M4 style platforms to use as defensive rifles. But many don't. And if you live in a state like mine, here in the People's Republic of Illinois, you can't buy one now. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to give you a couple things up to date on the Trump assassination attempt, some new things we've learned about that over the last few days. So if you want to hear about these things, stick around. Okay, in the investigation of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, we haven't found any really startling new evidence since the last little piece I put out. It's just a total failure. Someone should have been on that roof or covered that roof where the shooter fired from. Just that simple. There are all kinds of conspiracy theories starting to form, which is typical. Reports of extra gunmen, multiple shooters. That's normal. In fact, we heard that within 5 minutes of the shooting. That, oh gee, there were two shooters. There is an audio analysis out there that I have looked at. And audio analysis, in my opinion, have so many variables, they're really tough to be super accurate. And I think this might be the same guy who did an audio analysis of the Las Vegas country and western shooting there, where he claimed there was a second shooter because he had two different times of flight between a burst of gunfire and a burst hitting the pavement where the victims were. And that was real easy to fix. We still do not know what all calibers that shooter used in Las Vegas, but one time of flight matched a 5.56 carbine. The other time of flight matched a 7.62 by 51 carbine, so if he had an AR-10 there, that would perfectly explain, and throw that conspiracy theory out. The audio that I've seen for the Trump shooting shows a time of flight of 0.22 seconds between the boom of the gun and the supersonic crack of the bullet going by the microphone. That doesn't quite fit either. 0.22 does not match any type of 5.56 ammo that the young man would have fired. Time of flight for most of those should have been around 0.14 to 0.16 seconds. So if that's the case, if it's actually accurate, then the distance to target would have been more like 180 to 200 yards, but we have been quoted 130 to 150 yards all along. We know now there were 3 shooters there. We know that as a fact. The shooter who attempted to kill Trump is one. The Secret Service counter sniper who killed that murderer is the second shooter. There was another shot fired by a local agency SWAT sniper, which they think missed. So that explains the potential for 3 shooters. I'm not much of a believer in conspiracy theories, but the fact remains someone was assigned to either overwatch that roof or be on that roof, and they were not there, allowing that shooter to get up there. I still believe the wind was a significant factor. One commenter told me that no, I was wrong, the wind wasn't 20, it was only 8. I question their source because if you look at the giant flag behind President Trump, it was pretty much flat with the ground, which would be about 20 to 22 miles per hour. Both before the shooting, after the shooting, even an hour or two later, there was a pretty steady 15 to perhaps 25 mile an hour wind blowing from left to the right at Trump's perspective, which would have required 3 inches or more of windage correction. An inexperienced shooter might not have allowed for that. There are too many things going on there to ever really know for sure what happened. But I will stick with the bottom line is that Trump had an angel on his shoulder. He was not meant to die that day. All right, let's talk about ARs for self-defense. Since the riots of 2020, there have been an awful lot of first-time firearm purchasers. A lot of them are female. A lot of them would normally, from our point of view, look to be over on kind of the left side of the political spectrum. People who might have been anti-gun before, but they realized in 2020 that, gee, if we call the cops, they may not show up. That ultimately the responsibility to protect me and my family lies with me, not a government entity. So we've seen a lot of people buy pistols. I hope they've gotten good training with them. I hope they know how to be safe at home and effective if they know how to use it. But I think, especially after the Trump shooting, a lot of people are thinking, you know, gee, this crazy guy that said there could be a civil war, he might be right, because the hatred for Trump has not lessened. They've toned down their rhetoric a little bit, but there are still people out there calling for him to be eliminated by whatever means is necessary to save the democracy. If our democracy, or our republic actually, is in threat from anyone, it's not Trump. It's the other side of the spectrum. I predicted that if things got bad, they would push Biden out if they realized he was not going to win. Guess that prediction came true. Now we're looking at Vice President Harris. We'll make another prediction that if her poll numbers don't start to climb up, I think between now and the election, they will get rid of President Biden, either through the 25th Amendment or some other method. They will make her the president and hope that turning her into an incumbent will boost her polls. But make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, they will do anything they have to do to try to stop Donald Trump from being elected. So to me, the risk level has not gone down by him surviving an assassination attempt. All right, let's talk about ARs. Since that shooting, there have been several sources quote, obviously, that the AR is the most popular rifle in the country, which kind of helps us with the Supreme Court by saying it is definitely in common use. But here's an example. I got a fishing buddy. He's the most amazing muskie fisherman I've ever known. So we've been out on muskie trips this spring and talking about Civil War and what all could come along. And my buddy said, you know, I guess I need to get me an AR just in case I need something more than, you know, a concealed carry pistol if things go wild in the country. Well, that's good thinking. But he's got a problem. He can't go buy one in Illinois. The only people who can buy semi-auto style weapons in Illinois now are active or retired law enforcement officers like myself. That's not fair, but that's the way the law was written. So if you live in one of those, there's either 9 or 10 states, depending on how you read the definitions, 9 or 10 states where semi-automatic style rifles, AR platforms, are banned for sale. California, they're not really banned for sale, but they are so laden with modifications you have to do that they're really not semi-automatic rifles as we know them. So severe restrictions out there. If you're in one of those states and you think you need more than a concealed carry pistol, your options are greatly reduced. That doesn't make it right, and I think eventually the Supreme Court will overturn those. I think all of those semi-auto bans will be struck down, but just a couple of weeks ago they had an opportunity to pick up one of Illinois' cases, long before the case is finished, I understand, but the Supreme Court did not take the case. So this is going to have to continue through the legal process. It's going to take a couple more years, probably, until we can get these bans knocked out. If something goes bad in the election and the left is able to change the Supreme Court, we may not only have to suffer through these semi-auto bans, we may lose what we've gained. This is the most important election this country has probably ever faced. All right, so if you live in a state like Illinois, what can you do to upgrade your self-defense potential beyond a concealed carry pistol? Well, first of all, there are some ways around these laws. I'm told by a source I saw on the internet that while AR platforms are severely restricted in California, you actually can own an M1A, the civilian version of the M14 rifle, made by Springfield Armory and some others now. It's a rather big, heavy, it's a battle rifle, not an AR light handy type rifle, but apparently it's perfectly legal to have one and buy one in California. In many of the restrictive states, the M1 carbine is an option. it's not specifically banned. So if you can find a good, reliable carbine, and I will tell you that most of the reliable carbines are going to be either military manufactured, which means they're 80 years old, World War II vintage, or perhaps one of the newer ones that the companies that have brought them back in. Inland makes them, Auto Ordnance makes them, and there may be a couple of others. The universal carbines, which were the civilian-made ones kind of after World War II into the 70s, perhaps 80s, they're not known for high levels of reliability. Some of them aren't bad, especially the early ones, under 100,000 serial number, had mostly military parts, but their reputation is rather checkered. But if you can get your hands on a good, reliable M1 carbine, get some soft point ammo for it to use for self-protection. Full metal jacket is fine for training. But the soft point load, it makes it a pretty nasty little rifle out to about 100 yards. It's light, it's easy to shoot, plenty accurate enough. So an M1 carbine could be an option as well. In that same time frame is the venerable M1 Garand. Those are even legal here in Illinois because they don't have a detachable magazine. They have an end block clip. 8 rounds go in. When it's empty, the clip comes out and you reload it that way. Again, large, heavy. It's a battle rifle, not a light, handy self-defense rifle, but it is certainly reliable with the right kind of ammunition. And that brings up a point. For both the M1A and the M1 Garand, they're designed to feed military 30 caliber cartridges. The 30-06 for the M1 and the 7.62x51 or 308 Winchester for the M1A. Okay, so if an older rifle, like an M1 carbine, M1A, M1 Garand is not exactly what you had in mind, can't get other semi-automatic long guns for self-defense in your locale, then you got to look for something that's not a semi-automatic. First thing that always comes to my mind, and I think a lot of people in this country, is a lever action rifle. Now there are a lot of old ones out there, and if you've already got one, that's great. They are available in both pistol calibers and rifle calibers. There are a whole new breed of lever actions appearing on the market now with light attachment points, kind of tactical type stuff. There is one that will take 30 round box magazines from an AR-15 lever action, but it's a 5.56 caliber carbine. Maybe not a bad idea. They are available from 9mm pistol cartridges on up. Pistol caliber carbines in 9, 40, 45, and even a few in 10mm, they were pretty popular about 25, 30 years ago. And then their popularity waned. Lately we're seeing a comeback of the pistol caliber carbines, especially where semi-automatics are unrestricted. What they really give you is a nice, easy to hit with at 50 yards pistol. They don't gain an awful lot of power in the longer barrel, but they gain an awful lot of hit likelihood. Better sights, 3 points of contact on shoulder, cheek, hands, and all that. So you can hit targets better with a pistol caliber carbine. You're not necessarily hitting them much harder, unless you go with a Magnum pistol cartridge. I mentioned the 10mm. The 10mm walks the line. I'm not aware of a 10mm lever action, but there are certainly lever actions out there in 357 Magnum, 41 Magnum, 44 Magnum, 45 Colt, even the 454 Casull. They gain an enormous amount of power when you change from a 4, 5, or 6 inch pistol barrel to a 16 to 20 inch carbine barrel. It is typical for 357 and 44 Magnum cartridges to gain 50% more velocity from that carbine, which, if you believe in kinetic energy and you think that's a valuable measurement of how they perform on target, it's doubling or more the available kinetic energy. Most common, of course, are 357 and 44. I have one of each of those myself, and I've done videos. I'm going to do some more work this summer, show you how to work up some loads for a 44. But a lever action in one of those pistol caliber Magnum cartridges, including a 10mm if you can find one, they make a great self-defense rifle out to 100 yards, perhaps a little bit more. A 30-30, which is probably the most common lever action rifle cartridge out there, 30-30s are still widely available. That's a whole different power level above the pistol caliber carbines, and I think it's really about an ideal level of power for self-defense. It's going to be excellent to 100 yards, if you know what you're doing and understand a little bit of long-range shooting, they can work pretty effectively at 200 yards. One of the most common 30-30s out there is the Winchester 94, still in production. It is not necessarily the best choice because it's more difficult to put optics on. It's a top eject, so you have to figure out a way to get your optics mounted ahead of the action onto the barrel, and it can be done. There are systems that will allow you to do that. But a solid top lever action, like a Marlin, like a Henry, Mossberg made a few. I'm not sure if they're still in production. That solid top receiver ejects out the side, so you've just got, you know, drilled and tapped holes the same as you would on a bolt action rifle. So you can put optics on there, you can put lights on them pretty easily, and you can make them very effective. Now, for most of my rifles, I design my self-defense rifles, the ammunition for them at least, in a two-part fashion. First, I decide what I'm going to use for cheap training ammo, which in 5.56 or 7.62 by 51, I'm going to go with a GI full metal jacket load. That's the lowest price. They're perfectly adequate for training. And then I try to match that with a premium cartridge, premium round, that's going to give me the same trajectory. So out to 200-300 yards, the two loads are going to be interchangeable. I mentioned that with the M1 or the M1A, military ammo is loaded down from full load factory commercial ammo now, because propellant technology has advanced quite a lot since the 40s or 50s. So ideally, you need a little bit lower level of performance with your premium load, and there aren't many available. The ball ammo is out there. There are several companies making M2 grade 30-06 ammo for the M1 because it needs to be downloaded some. But I'm not familiar with many that are making soft point or hollow point loads for those. So you may have to go to a custom loader if you are a hand loader yourself. You can work up a load with the same bullet weight as your full metal jacket, match the velocity as close as you can. It's what I do for the my 30 caliber AR. For the 5.56, I use a Black Hills load that's a 50 grain hollow point, and I match that with 55 grain full metal jackets. If you're looking at something like the 30-30, that's really not available. There really isn't any cheap full metal jacket training kind of ammo out there. So all I can tell you is every year before hunting season in states where rifles are used, Winchester, Federal, Remington, they're going to have a simple, no frills soft point load available for the 30-30 at probably the lowest price you're going to get. So buy a bunch of it, have plenty on hand so that you've got some for training, and you've got enough war reserve to use the 30-30 as a defensive rifle. People ask, what kind of optics do you want? Say you've got a Marlin 30-30, you want to set it up for defensive use. It depends on the situation you're in. If you think your shots are going to be 100 yards or less, then maybe a simple red dot optic, a 1X, no magnification, like an aim point. Burris makes them, Sig makes them, EOTech is the high end, and aim point are the high end of that genre. If you think you're going to need a little bit more reach, then maybe a low power variable optic, LPVO. And typically these will go from 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 8. There are some available out there that go 1 to 10. I don't think you need 10 power on these kind of rifles. I think a 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 will do adequately for you. If you can afford it, then I would by all means get one with a lighted reticle. That's going to give you day-night capability. Now, with my lever action carbines that I have for home defense, I have two Browning 92s. They were made back in the 80s. They're top ejectors, typical Winchester design. So what I have done is put a section of Picatinny rail on the magazine tube, and I have a Streamlight, I believe it's a TLR2G. It gives me a white light of about 300 lumens. It also gives me a green aiming laser. So by flipping on that green aiming laser, which is zeroed for 100 yards, just like my daytime sights, I have day-night capability. With a lighted reticle of either a red dot or a low power variable optic, you can get that day-night capability. Okay, not a lever action. Probably the most common in this country after that. I mean, there are pumps out there. There are civilian semi-autos like the Remington 742. A lot of those were not all that reliable to begin with. They have not been made for a number of years. It's going to be very difficult to get parts for, but if you have one, and it works for you, then just get the kind of ammo you need to feed it, and you do have a semi-auto. Mostly they're small capacity magazines, so if you can get more magazines, by all means, you got to do that. But beyond that, we're looking primarily at bolt-action rifles. Now, bolt-action rifles fall into two categories. Military bolt-actions, which really haven't been used since World War II. For us, for the United States, some of our bolt-actions were used in World War II, but primarily our infantry fighters had the semi-auto M1 Garand. So these are older rifles. The advantage to the military rifles are they generally have good sights for fighting type, especially the American-made ones with the peep sight. And they may have features that are an advantage. The 1903 Springfield, for example, has a magazine cutoff. You can fill the magazine with 5 rounds, flip the cutoff switch on the left side of the action, and what that does is depress that column of cartridges down just a little bit, so now it becomes a single shot. So the way the rifle was intended to be used is you fire one, throw the bolt, throw a cartridge in, fire one, and keep repeating. To be used as a single shot where you didn't need a lot of rapid fire. But if you were in the trenches of World War I, we'll say, and suddenly the enemy is coming across no man's land and you need a lot of shots fast, you'd flip your magazine cutoff and you have 5 rounds that you can very quickly work through the bolt. Most of them also take stripper clips so that you can feed them more rapidly. Stick in a stripper clip with 5 rounds, thumb it down, throw the clip away, and you've fed the magazine pretty quickly. The other advantage is in their tolerances. They're made to be shot hot. If you get a commercial bolt action and you actually are fighting with it, firing a lot of rounds in rapid succession, they can get to the point where they will bind up because they're just not made to get that hot and have the firing pin still work, the extractor still work well, and things like that. So a military style, even an old military style bolt action can be a very viable fighting rifle. In the United States, the 03 Springfield, the 1917 Enfield, they both take the 30-06. The 303 British in their Enfields is a great round. Even the German K98. One big advantage of the British Lee Enfields is that they cock on closing. It's the way the bolt operates. Most of the Mauser type designs, they cock the action when you move the bolt up after it's been fired. So it's a pretty substantial amount of force to get up to both cock the striker, the firing pin, and unlock the bolts, and then you feed. With the British design, they cock on closing. So it's a lot easier to pop that handle up, bring it back, eject, pick up the new round, and going forward is your power stroke. So it cocks as you go forward, and so they're actually a much faster bolt action to use, in my experience. But I have seen guys who have played with the 303s on the range. There was a guy sitting one time on a pepper popper at 100 yards. He could reliably hit a pepper popper, work the bolt, and hit it a second time before it fell. So if you're going to live with that kind of a rifle, that's a great design to pick. Finding a good source of 303 British ammo now is going to be a trick, and especially finding a supply of soft point or hollow point, good premium grade defensive ammo is going to be a trick. If you load, you can load what you need. In commercial bolt actions, probably the neatest concept that came out on the market, in my opinion, was Jeff Cooper's Scout rifle concept. And what the Scout rifle was a very short, light carbine bolt action, generally chambered for the 308 or the 7.62. It had a forward mounted optical device, so the optic was long eye relief. It sat ahead of the action because he stuck with that old mentality of shoot one, load one, shoot one, load one. So you had to load in the top. Even if you didn't have that shoot one, load one, you had to load your rounds into that blind magazine from the top. Some Scout designs, semi kind of Scout designs, have come later. Those being the Steyr Scout, which was Cooper's original idea brought to the ultimate. They're expensive, they're kind of rare, but they feed from a box magazine. So a conventional scope, low power variable optic, is going to work just fine on them. Ruger has made some Scout type rifles, Savage has made some Scout type rifles, there are probably others out there. And if they feed from a bottom magazine, then the optics are no big deal. You can put a standard optic on there. If you're not thinking that you're going to be firing a lot of rounds in a self-defense kind of situation, and especially if you're more rural, where distances beyond 100 might be a little bit more common, then a scout rifle could be a good option for you. What calibers for the scout rifle? I personally think a .308 would be the first choice. If you don't think you're going to work at distances, if you're going to work more of in an urban environment, a scout rifle in a 5.56 cartridge could be very handy. You're probably going to get more rounds in your magazine. You have the availability of less expensive ammo for training. So either 5.56 or 7.62 I think would be good in a scout. Now if you happen to have a bolt action hunting rifle, longer barrel, probably higher magnification scope, typically that's a hunting rifle, but it can be pressed into service for self-defense so long as your scope will dial down to 3 power or less. 4 power and above is tough to use in pretty close environments. The rifles are going to be heavier, the barrels are longer, the recoil is probably going to be higher depending on what caliber choice you have made. But at the same time, these rifles, if you know what you're about, they can be pressed into service as a sort of a sniper rifle. And I'll tell you, if we ever go to civil war and they think they're going to conquer the people of the western United States, they're going to find an awful lot of hunters out there now that over the last 20 years or so have developed extremely precise, extremely long range hunting rifles. These guys are snipers equal to anything our military has produced. So those kind of rifles can serve you very well. Now there are a lot of other rifles out there on the market. You might have a Marlin in .35 Remington. You might have a Savage 99 lever action. You might have a lever action rifle that takes typical hunting bottleneck cartridges. Browning makes a BLR, Henry makes a version. The old Savage 99s have been out of production for a lot of years, but they all took at least short action, some of them long action, 30-06 length hunting cartridges. So there you've got common ammunition, you've got probably decent optics on there as well, and with that lever action you've got some pretty quick follow-up shots. So if you can't get a modern sporting rifle, an AR or M4 platform in your state, you can look at lever guns, you can look at bolt guns if need be, look at older semi-autos that might fit with the laws in your state, M1 carbines, M1 Garands, M1As, or like my buddy the muskie fisherman, stick with your shotgun. Shotguns can be really good for self-defense. They're not very good weapons to go on offense with, but I think in the troubles that we may have ahead, I think we're looking primarily at defensive work. Buckshot, double-aught buck, maybe even number 4 buck can work out to 20, 25 yards. The Federal Flight Control buckshot holds some of the tightest patterns I've seen. 20, 25, maybe 30 yards, you're going to keep those pellets on a man-sized target. Slugs, good to 50. If you have rifle sights on your shotgun, they can be good to 100. If you go with a rifled barrel shotgun, like were developed for shotgun-only deer hunting states, which are, or were, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, some parts of Michigan, things like that. Some of those specialized sabot loads and rifled barrels, they're good out to 150 yards or so. And since all those states have now gone to straight case rifle cartridges allowed for deer hunting, you may see shotgun people selling off those rifled barrel shotguns. You might get a bargain there. Slugs are very expensive, but hopefully you're not going to need a lot of them. The rifled guns are not going to be good with buckshot or birdshot. I've never done a personal test on that, but I just can't imagine. And I will probably do a test on that and be able to report to you later. So shotguns are a viable alternative. Shotguns are also going to be good. If we get into a Minuteman kind of situation where you may have a neighborhood group that is defending itself, old guys like me, we're going to be in the rear with the gear, most likely. We're going to be cooking, we're going to be doing communicating, analyzing intel that comes in, providing logistic support. Shotguns are fine for us. So maybe we have those M4s that we can give to the younger people who are going to be out there more on the front line, more in harm's way. Be prepared to defend your family. If all you can get is a shotgun, that's great. Pumps are good, semi-autos are good, get the right kind of semi-auto that's set up as a fighting shotgun, you can do some serious work with it. Topics we don't like to talk about, but I really think we have the potential for some very dark days ahead. And we've seen that the left are not willing to back off of their rhetoric. They're not willing to back off of the idea that Donald Trump or the MAGA people in general are not going to be the end of this country, when we believe the end of the country is at hand now. And if we don't stop the leftists, the liberals, then our Constitution is in grave danger. So I'm sorry to sound that way, to sound negative on these videos, but folks, I just don't see bright days ahead until we get through the election and see what the outcome is going to be. So thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for subscribing. Check and see if you need to resubscribe, because YouTube seems to have a habit of unsubscribing people to these kind of channels. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. Give me your comments, whether you like what I'm saying or not. I do not erase comments. I welcome all opposing viewpoints. So think about what you need beyond your handgun. Think about what you might be able to get in your state, if you're in a restricted state. And stay safe out there, boys and girls. Take care.
Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Uh-huh. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Mm-hmm. Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.